Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered and by paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the first City Lifestyle Committee meeting of the 18th of January 2023, and I declare this meeting open at 10:52am. I'd like to advise attendees that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. I trust everyone's had a good break. Welcome back. I note Councillor Murphy has submitted a leave of absence. There being no other leaves of absence, could I please call for a move for the motion that Councillor Murphy's leave be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Seconded by Councillor Hall. By a show of hands. And that has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I now refer to declarations of conflicts of interest. Do any councillors wish to declare a conflict of interest against any reports on today's agenda? Thank you. Councillor Murphy. Beg your pardon. Councillor Wilcox. I am a little rusty. Councillor Wilcox.
That's okay, thank you. Councillors, you will have noted that item 5.1 has come before you because I noted that I had a conflict of interest in relation to the matter arising from the fact that my daughter was a student at Greenbank State School. However, I do not propose to proceed with making a declarable conflict of interest today, as I've received advice from the City Solicitor, which has confirmed that in accordance with section 150E01B4 of the Local Government Act 2009, I do not need to declare a conflict of interest in relation to this matter. Relevantly, this provision specifically provides that interests are not declarable conflicts of interest when they relate to a councillor having an interest in school because their child being a student, or now she is actually a former student of Greenbank State School.
Thank you, councillor, and I respect your abundance of caution and seeking further advice. So, councillors, you'd note that 5.1 still appears on the agenda for today. In the interests of transparency, we will still run with that agenda item, just so that if there's any questions for anyone watching at home, they're able to follow along. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilcox. Okay, councillors, I now draw your attention to item 5.1 on today's agenda. 5.1 is the determination of community benefit fund request, as mentioned by Councillor Wilcox. Through the Director of Community and Lifestyle, Mr. Brad White, can the Acting Manager of Community Services, Ms. Noelle Hudson, please enter discussions? Good morning and welcome, Noelle. Good to have you back.
Good morning, Councillor, and through the Chair, I'd like to present this report. As we said, this is a Community Benefit Fund application from Greenbank Primary School's PNC. It's to resource an activity to raise funds for the school's music program. I take this report as read and invite any questions.
Thank you, Noelle. Do we have any questions? Thank you, Councillor Lane.
Thanks. Given that we don't have a conflict of interest, we're not making a decision on the viability of this project. It's back to the Divisional Councillor, isn't it?
We had the opportunity to withdraw the report, councillor, but given that this has actually gone out public, that we will now have the opportunity to speak to the report, and I've invited councillors to have their say on the report.
Does the Divisional Councillor support the project? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment with regard to the report? Can I have some? Oh, sorry, councillor. Thank you very much. So we've got Councillor Bradley's moved the report. Seconder for the report is Councillor Wilcox. By a show of hands, all of those in support? Thank you, councillors. That's been unanimously supported. Does anyone have any general business for the Acting Community Services Manager? Thank you, Councillor Lane.
No, well, it's okay. I would like to pass a huge thank you along to Jason Chin and Kurt and his team. They are amazingly wonderful at doing repairs on my community facilities in Division 2. Their efforts and their follow-up has been fantastic, and I want to say a great big thanks publicly to that team. They have done a wonderful job. Thank you very much. And congratulations on your permanent appointment to that role, Jason.
Thank you. Any other comments for the Acting Manager? Noelle, do you have any general business for us?
Not this month, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies. Councillors, I now refer to item 5.2, which is a future leasing of Underwood Park Cafe. Through the Director of Community and Lifestyle, Mr. Brad White, can the Acting Manager of Sport, Leisure and Facilities, Mr. Jason Chin, please enter discussions? When you're ready, Jason, you may proceed.
Thank you. Through the Chair, good morning, councillors, and Happy New Year. This report has been prepared to seek Council's direction for the future use of the Underwood Park Cafe. The report to committee was requested through a general business item last year, and it follows the end of an expression of interest process to identify potential operators. The Underwood Park Cafe space was originally built as part of the recent redevelopment of Underwood Park. At the time of the redevelopment, the space was built to accommodate a business that served prepackaged foods, coffees, and the like, and therefore a grease trap hadn't been installed. Unfortunately, the council officers involved in the planning for this space are no longer with council, so we don't have the full picture on the decisions made for this facility at the time. However, a tender process was undertaken at the time of the redevelopment to find a suitable operator for the cafe, but that didn't receive any submissions. Subsequently, a 12-month licence agreement was entered into with an operator to trial the potential of the cafe in an interim arrangement. 6 months into this arrangement, the operator requested to surrender the licence on the basis that it was not commercially viable. This was described as primarily being due to the inability to prepare food on site due to the absence of a grease trap. Following this, an expression of interest was undertaken for organisations to submit a proposed use for the space that incorporated a cafe-style offering. This report details the outcomes of this process and provides 2 options for the strategic direction for the future use of the space. The first option being the installation of infrastructure that would allow a commercial operator to obtain a food licence, and the second to change the primary use from a cafe to an alternate style operation. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jason. Do I have any questions? Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Just a couple of questions. Obviously, we've got other cafes around the city, so I'm just trying to understand, are they currently leased?
We have a number of cafes. There's a number that we are investigating a similar option to, being Barron Bar. Logan Village Green it currently has a coffee cart type setup, so it's not a full cafe. And there's Flagston, it's vacant currently and in a similar type situation.
Okay, and are they set up the same sort of way with just an area for food that's brought in as opposed to...
Flagston and Barron Bar have a built space similar to Underwood Park. Logan Village Green has just a pad that a coffee cart can set up on.
Okay, and do we know, so we know why they're not financially viable in the past, these sorts of cafes? Is it because of...
We're probably seeing more interest from operators now, and I think there was probably at the end, through COVID, there was less interest there.
Yep.
And the idea for cafes in parks is one that I think there's a positive outcome for the community. It's one that we still need to trial in terms of the commercial viability, and so we're through efforts like this, we're testing the viability as we go.
Okay, and do we know whether the other clubs at Underwood Park have their own sort of catering facilities as such, like the actual sporting clubs?
They do. So the netball, I believe, has a canteen type operation, and all the clubs have their own canteen operations. Okay. The thought for this facility is that it will mainly service the people at Underwood Hollow and the Mountain Biking Association.
Okay, perfect. And can I just ask Councillor Bradley, so from the community's perspective, what are they sort of looking for in this sort of area, please?
Thank you, Councillor Stamp, for your question. I'm very grateful that you actually asked that, because what actually happened when I returned this term was not what was consulted to the community. So there was a restaurant that was publicly consulted that was supposed to go into Underwood Park. That didn't eventuate. And during administration, the whole thing got changed, and we've been left with this little room with a sink and a bench, and that's about it. So the community would love a facility there, 100%. actually coincidentally, in the last week, I've been contacted by two different entities. One from Division 3, a resident from Division 3 that I used to represent, who I won't go into it now, but that would be an absolutely awesome group of people if they went in there, because it would actually get unemployed people working. If that eventuates, that's one. The other one is a cafe owner in Division 1. I won't go into that either here, but I've given the manager the details. So, but the community would absolutely love having food and coffee and snacks, etc. And hence why the feedback that was given by the trial that was done for 6 months was basically that's what people wanted. They wanted the hot chips, and there's not facilities there for that. You know, the actual...
No grease.
Yeah, there's no grease trap, so they can't do it. So it's sort of, you've got a facility here that doesn't cater for the community, basically.
If I could just dive in there, Jason, just a question for you. So if this report's supported today, you'll actually go out to an EOI process or a tendering process to look for a suitable tenant, is that right?
That's correct. Because the scope of the building would change, we would go through the tender process again, which would allow these organisations the opportunity to submit tenders.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor? No, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you started speaking to it already around Barrenbar. So Barrenbar had the exact same problem. We built a kiosk, and for some reason we didn't think that you would want to even make a toasted sandwich, because you can't make anything that isn't pre-packaged on site. And sometimes businesses will use loopholes where they don't have a grease trap, that they'll get a pre-packaged like ham and cheese toasty, and they'll take it out of the wrapper and put it into a sandwich press, which they're not meant to do, but you can't do that on a council facility because everything gets done by the book. So even getting a small grease trap is really expensive. And then once you've gone to the cost of a small grease trap, the question becomes, why not get a bigger one in case this decides to be expanded later, because it's very expensive to go back and put them in later. So it's just a bit of short-term thinking, I think, when planning was done. And I know it's different in Councillor Bradley's situation because council didn't do that planning, but for Barrenbar, I still have no idea why it was intended to be a kiosk. Rumoured that former Councillor Abel wanted to own and operate that kiosk when he retired. You would have thought the man would have made sure he had a grease trap, but there you go.
Councillor Raven, is there a question in there?
No, just to say that it's actually pretty common in old planning not to put grease traps in. Now we're seeing with the increasing expectations on health standards and also people wanting to use parks as recreation areas, that I think we should have it as a standard issue wherever possible.
Through the chair, for us, there's a learning exercise here, and it is going forward. We'll be looking at the viability of these spaces and what's best to install in each facility. Thank you.
And Jason, just on that, so at the moment Barrenbar is not tenanted, it's vacant, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. We're currently going through a similar process to this for Barrenbar. There's an operator that's identified a similar arrangement. They can operate, or they're seeing a viability if they had a grease trap. So we're looking at the potential of installing that and potential funding sources.
And for the benefit of councillors' knowledge, at Logan Village there was a site which is a concrete slab effectively with water and power to enable a pop-up on the site. Unfortunately, that has closed also. They didn't find it to be economically viable, but very limited infrastructure on site. Okay, moving on, I've got a question from Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's to the Divisional Councillor as well, if that's okay. So, Councillor Bradley, just wondering, so is this the last thing that needs to be fixed up in Underwood Park, or are there many, many more items? Just wondering.
I actually mentioned to the manager I'm concerned if this question comes up, because we'd have to go into confidential for me to actually disclose that.
Okay, no worries. So,
Yeah.
End of question. Thank you.
Could I just add, if councillors have an appetite to move into confidential to discuss this further, I'm happy to do that, but outside of the parameters of this report. I'd like for us to just stay focused on this report. So if there's an appetite to do that, please in GB, let me know. Otherwise, we'll progress with the report at this stage. Any other questions, Councillor Fraser? I've got Councillor Lane, Councillor Wilcox, and then I've got Councillor Jeremiah.
Thanks very much to you, Madam Chair. I went to the manager and asked the questions about why these haven't been viable, and he was very blunt. If you can't get hot chips with a bit of tomato sauce, there's no point to them. And that's reasonable. Council's not in, and also the rent that we charge on them for a business emerging, where we actually look at what's market lease. Well, market lease doesn't happen in a park, not straight off. So we talked about the flexibility of actually providing some ongoing sustainability for these businesses as they get themselves up and running, so they can actually create their own economy, much like Devon Pixies did down at the Kingston Butter Factory. And I was really pleased with the answers. They were very blunt and very concise. If we can expend this money on both this side and when the Berrinba one comes up, it's just common sense. It's good for the community and actually gets people a cold drink, hot chippies with tomato sauce when they go to the park. It's not rocket science. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. Councillor Wilcox?
Thank you. So, just to be clear, how much funding was left over from the original project?
Through the chair, I believe it was around 150,000.
Okay, so if we're to approve this today and say, yes, it can go in here, so out of that 150, you'd have 33,000 that would go to this project.
Through the chair, the 33,000 was an estimate that was put together for how much this would cost. We'd look at detailed costing, so it could be more, could be less. There is also other works that still remain to be done at Underwood Park. But once the project's finalised, then the remaining funding would be returned to council.
Okay, because all I'm looking at it because we have 4 parks that basically aren't viable at the moment. You haven't got Flagstone Adventure Park on there, but it's not leased either. So you have 4 parks that aren't viable. Everyone that's been through the EOI process, or everyone that's looked at it so far, has said we can't sustain it for the hours that council wants because you can't get your hot chips. You can't do this, that, and the other thing. Mine is 4 walls and basically not even a kitchen sink. It's more like a laundry sink with a bench space that you serve on, and that's it. So for me, I don't understand how, one, we can even say that we're calling it a cafe space when it's not. It actually technically is a kiosk because you can only put fridges in there, freezers, that sort of thing. You've got to bring in a movable stainless steel bench and that sort of thing. So for me, if we're going to go along the lines of saying, yes, let's go down the lines of putting a grease trap in for one, let's make it fair and equitable for all 4 that are struggling. And I know this isn't in this report, so I'd like to just put it out there so that we approve this one, then yes, we also look at the other 3 that are struggling to get EOIs, and we put the infrastructure in there so that they can all be viable in the future.
Through the chair, it is a process that we're going through internally for all these sites to activate them, and on a case-by-case basis looking at what's the best outcome for each of these sites.
And just to clarify the question, or my question on the basis of Councillor Wilcox's comments, the funding for this particular fit out will actually come from existing funding that's resting with Underwood Park. There's no new funding.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Wilcox? Thank you. A question from Councillor Jeremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question to council officers regarding the content in the report. It's stated, or at least gives the reader the impression, that the reason why this specific operator wasn't commercially viable is because of a lack of infrastructure. And at least in my reading, I haven't seen an acknowledgement of the risk of the hospitality sector. I read here on my computer that 30% of hospitality businesses go broke within their first year of operations. So do you think the high risk of the hospitality sector contributed to the commercial inviability of this business? And if so, why wasn't it mentioned in the report?
Through the chair, under the risk sections, the commercial viability, it was mentioned that there's no guarantee of the commercial viability of the spaces. We could have gone in more detail in that regard. Acknowledged.
I think that's worthwhile, and separate to the specific report is considering...
Councillor Jeremiah, could I just interrupt you for a second? The area councillor has something that she'd like to say in response to your question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the business that did do a trial are actually still operating.
Okay, so I think going forward, looking at new infrastructure, especially in the new areas of our city, I think as a council we should reconsider whether building new versions of this sort of infrastructure is appropriate, because it seems quite high risk. You could argue that it provides a unique advantage to specific operators who get a lease that tends to be less than the market rate, while providing just a spot for food vans and for coffee vans to come and set up is a far more competitive and equal way of providing those hot chips and that coffee that the community wants. So going forward, I think rethinking the sort of infrastructure that we build in future council projects would be worthwhile. Thank you.
Through the chair, that's part of the learnings that we as a branch have gained out of these sites, and going forward it will be looking at case by case the viability of installing such infrastructure, or cafes even in general, at sites.
And just on that, Jason, can we make sure that those learnings do get fed back to councillors? I think it's a good question, and you know, invariably we want to support the community, but there are economic decisions that underpin this, so feedback to councillors in due course would be appreciated. Anything further, Councillor Heremiah? No, thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I was nervous that this might be straying from the report, but Councillor Heremiah's line of comment I think has made it more relevant. But yeah, I also just wanted to comment that I think that it's the possibility is that it's not feasible long term. So I don't know that it would be wise for us to be necessarily ensuring that all of the existing parks are brought up to an equal. I think this is actually just a wonderful opportunity for us to see if it makes one of these viable with the grease trap. So that was just a comment, really.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other comments from any other councillors? Being no further comments, you're about to see behind me, there it is, the future leasing of Underwood Park Cafe. Do I have somebody to move the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do I have someone to second the recommendation? Councillor Stemp, by show of hands, can I see those who are in support of the recommendation? Thank you, councillors. That has been unanimously supported. Okay, councillors, that brings us to the end of the Acting Manager's report. Do any councillors have any general business for the Acting Manager? Thank you, Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Through you, Christmas is a time when people wind down generally in the community, go away and have fun. My residents actually get to breathe, look around and point out all the things that we haven't done or that they don't like. And so over the Christmas period, we got absolutely flogged by people pointing out different things. And Director, I managed to CC you into a number of emails where concerns were raised by local residents about fire hazards, about overgrown areas in our parks and on our roadsides, just general inquiries about a range of different things. And it was all about the community services portfolio. And I just want to say, I noticed that Blair's in the room. Big shout out to you, Blair, because she came out on site with me and she worked through issues and things are being actioned. They're being actioned within a fortnight of them being raised. They're actually getting done. It's a big A from community services over that Christmas New Year period and into early January, when my residents managed to look around and point out all of the wonderful things that they wanted done. So thank you very much to your team.
Thank you, Councillor. Do any other councillors have any GB for the Acting Manager of Sport, Leisure and Facilities? No. There being none, Jason, do you have any general business for us?
No.
Thanks very much. Well done. Councillors, that actually completes our agenda run through for today. Do any other councillors have any general business for the Director? I nearly said Acting Director, Brad. For the Director. Full-time Director. There being none, Brad, do you have any general business for us? No. Councillors, there being no further general business, I now declare the meeting closed at 11:16 a.m. and we'll reopen the City Governance Committee in 10 minutes' time at 11:26 a.m. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Have a great day.